Eisenhower, Reagan. In their own ways, they were all successful. They were not smart the way these people were smart. But they certainly were smart in other ways. And what they were smart is practical wisdom. Practical wisdom. How to act in the world and be successful in the world. Not so much with money. For example, Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter got to be president. He's a Democrat. The Speaker of the House is Tip O'Neill, another Democrat. You can't be a successful president if you don't get along with the Speaker of the House, because your bills aren't going to be introduced. He didn't want to invite him over to the White House for dinner. He didn't like him. He thought he was too rough-edged and a real Irish pal. Well, Tip O'Neill's a pretty sensitive guy. Here he is, a Democratic president. He's not being invited to the White House. 1 week goes by, 2 weeks go by, a month goes by. He's really steaming. I mean, he has a legislative agenda, Carter. How does he think he's going to pass it without me? And finally, it's got back to Carter, and Carter said, oh, I'll send Hamilton Jordan over to talk to him. That took care of Carter. No, on the other hand, Ronald Reagan gets to be president. He invites O'Neill the second day. They drink Irish whiskey and sing Irish songs, and they became friends. Practical wisdom. You want things done, you see things clearly. Another aspect of practical wisdom, seeing things clearly. Now, all of us, you could make a good argument, I could do it myself, that we all see things through the eyes we have, through our experiences, the blinders we all wear. But you can try to see things clearly. We can all make the attempt of seeing things as clearly as we can. Just try to overcome our own prejudices, our own blinders, which we all have. It's astounding to me. And Lyndon Johnson did very similar. He was a bully, but he also got things done. He called in, there was a case of, Senator from Ohio, Frank Church. Frank Church didn't like Lyndon Johnson, was a big opponent of the Vietnam War and all, but Johnson needed him to approve one of his big initiatives, the war on poverty. And Church was against that. He said the people in Idaho don't want that. There are no poor people in Idaho. So Johnson had a dam, a papier-mâché model of a dam being built in Idaho, and he put it on his desk. He called Church into his office. Church came in, and Johnson, with his fist, smashed the dam. Church voted for the war on poverty. I mean, people, they use the tools they have. Another aspect of using practice, go with what you have. Use the tools you have. It really works. Some of these other guys, I mean, Woodrow Wilson, I mean, people like that thing. Eisenhower was a very successful president. Reagan was. Eisenhower graduated almost at the bottom of his class in West Point. He's now rated almost great by the president. Harry Truman didn't go to college. Very well-read man, but he didn't go to college. People now rate him almost great. Very, very similar. Franklin Roosevelt, again, gentleman sees all the way. Certainly one of the top 5 presidents we've ever had. It's just interesting how people succeed in the world and by using practice. And they all acted with empathy, their own way. Their own way. I mean, again, these are sometimes hard to define these things. But then you think about, other people. Someone defined practical wisdom as doing the right thing for the right reason at the right time. The right thing for the right reason at the right time. One of the great relatives of practical wisdom, though they didn't know about it, is the American philosophy of pragmatism. This is a very American philosophy. William James, John Dewey, Charles Peirce, other people whose names.
I took that class.
Pardon?
No. I said I took that course in college.
It's good course. I took one too. Yeah, I did too. It's good stuff. Yeah, it was good stuff. This is in America, but it's very similar to practical wisdom, where generally what they said, and this is I'm really summarizing a lot of stuff here, is that if something works, it's probably true. And James actually William James was a really wise man, really good man. He said, truth is something that happens to an idea. Interesting, think about that. Truth is something that happens to an idea. Now, you're looking at me oddly. It's a very interesting thing. Yeah, I once gave students an exam on. I said, discuss this. Let's go back, and it's the year 1200. Imagine we're in the year 1200, right? And we're all at a meeting, and we're discussing, does the sun move around the earth, or the earth move around the sun? What would everyone say? Year 1200.
Well, and the
Sun moves.
sun went around the earth.
All the smart people, Thomas Aquinas thought that, he probably was the smartest man of the year 1200. That's right, the sun, if you didn't say that, something really bad would happen to it. But be that as it may. So truth was something that happened to an idea. They're saying this is true, we know it's not now. Truth is something that happens to an idea. The idea was that geocentric.
Science is not always correct either.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's exactly right. It's not always correct. It's correct in an instrumental way. If you have a bad toothache and a dentist knows how to deal with it, it's true for now. It works. That's what the pragmatists say. It's a true idea because it works. Your tooth won't hurt it anymore. But a lot of other things get displaced. Maybe the ultimate reality is we'll never know. Maybe we're not made to know these things. It's possible we just never be that smart. I just read this book, Francis de Waal, about will we ever know really what an animal is thinking? And he said no. And he said, and this guy's a great animal expert. I mean, he's really, really knows what he's talking about. He said, no, it's not going to happen. I mean, there are things we just won't know, which is another form of epistemic humility. Not, just saying there are things we're just not going to know. And sometimes you hear some very, Einstein said that. Now there are things just we're probably never going to, because you will never get, he had a great line, I almost could say it in German. He said, we'll never know the secrets of the old man, which he meant his word for God. We'll never know their secrets. Another important aspect of practical wisdom, and this is, I think, again, this is also a pragmatism, is looking at something contextually in the context of it. Now, some of this gets very controversial. For example, there are people who acted fairly wisely who owned slaves. Some of our founding fathers. And not if they don't own slaves, they certainly didn't disapprove of slavery. Some of them owned slaves flat out. George Washington did. Jefferson did. Adams didn't, but he lived up where we live in Boston. He didn't need slaves. Maybe if he lived in the South. Madison did. Should we condemn them now? Should we, people say, let's take all there's a big movement to take the Jefferson founded the University of Virginia. It's a beautiful school, very fine school. It's a giant statue of him. So there's a movement to take the statue down because he owned slaves. I mean, you should try to understand things contextually. Again, it's not everyone hates slavery. Jefferson himself didn't like it, but he had them. He didn't free them. George Washington certainly would take them off the dollar bill. He owned slaves. We have to understand things contextually. It's a very important thing to do, and it could be very controversial. Very controversial. And it's hard. It's a hard thing to do. I remember in college, in English class, we had to read quite a bit of poems by T.S. Eliot. T.S. Eliot was a real anti-Semite. Really didn't like Jews. Now, this was at New York University, full of Jews. The teacher was Jewish. And of course, some of the students brought it up. I said, I don't want to read this. Some of the poems themselves talked about the Jews under the rats or some lines like that in his poetry. And well, the context of the time, a lot of English people were, Eliot was still alive. That's how old I am. But he said, so where does contextuality begin and where does it end?
And where do you draw the line?
That's right. Where do you draw the line?
And that's where do you say enough is enough?
That's right. Where do you say?
This is not tolerable. This
Right.
is not humane. It's so hard.
It is hard. It's very. We're seeing all these things with women now. Certainly, I agree. There's terrible stuff, and I've seen it in my own life and all. But you're right. It's a very, very interesting issue. But it involves being wise, seeing things down. You're right. It's hard. I mean, if wisdom's not mathematics. In other words, mathematics. Here's the equation: solve for x, and you solve it. But it's not.
Well, I'm just thinking of Jefferson, and
So if I were black and every day now had to go by that statue,
Right.
and there's no empathy, so where's, yeah, you can put things into the context, but to be wise now, you have to also have empathy that.
Well, to be wise now, but I'm sure there are quite a few blacks at the University of Virginia. I'm virtually positive there must be now. And so they do walk by, they must walk by that statue all the time. I mean, what would you take? Yeah, what attitude do I like reading Shakespeare a lot. One of my heroes. I love Shakespeare. I mean, The Merchant of Venice is
Yeah.
certainly fairly anti-Semitic. I mean, Charlotte doesn't exactly come off well.
You said you should put, part of wisdom is putting things in
Yes,
context.
absolutely.
So I wonder if there are just basic human qualities regardless of the context. So empathy and a concern for another human being,
Yeah.
that goes beyond the context in which the times you live in dictate. So if someone's owning slaves, and that is the moray of that time, still, you as a person should feel something about that, just as a human being, maybe. I don't know, should there be certain qualities that humans have across the contextual line?
Well, that's a very good point. These are wonderful questions you're asking, all of you. I mean, that's why I said this is a mathematic. Aristotle owned slaves. Great hero. I mean, he wrote a lot of this stuff we're talking about, but he owns. The Greek society is based on slavery, classical Greek.
Slavery still today.
Oh, yeah, there's plenty of slavery. And that, of course, we would condemn it. But it's not, our livelihood isn't dependent on slavery, the way it might be in countries that have slaves.
Yeah, look at Jefferson had children with one of his
Yeah.
slaves,
Right.
and recently the descendants were very proud to say that they were
That's true. That's a very
related
interesting,
to
thank you.
Jefferson.
That's right, the black descendants, or part black
Right.
descendants, said they were very proud of it, which is a very compassionate, sort of humane thing. I was very moved by that. I read that also. These are tricky issues. I mean, if it was simple, you wouldn't have to take a class on it.
And yet at Yale, they took, Calhoun.
Calhoun. That's right, they did do that at
Right.
Yale. Those Yaleys, they were all.
Right, my husband was in Calhoun and, he was
You're right, he was
objected against.
You're
Because he
absolutely
said,
right.
It was part of tradition, and at that time, he was considered a hero.
Oh, yeah, he still, I mean, he was taught, I remember being taught that he was, you're right.
The swastika and the Holocaust, the very ideas of those have attached so much emotion that they really can't be discussed in the context of wisdom. So there are certain things that are off limits to the concept of wisdom, is my point. I'm not.
No, I think you're right. I do believe there are things that are evil. I would say I believe in evil. There are things so awful that that's the only word we can use for them. And I'd say you're right. I agree completely with you.
Because you couldn't.
You could,
I mean, what I'm saying is, it's not, I'm not saying it's so evil you can't talk about it, which it is. What I'm saying is, you can't talk about it in the context of wisdom, because it's been put in a box.
Oh, I see what you're saying. You're saying, yeah, well, in a
It's
way
been
that's
put
true.
away in a box.
Yeah. It's true, you're right about that. I mean, and we should talk about it because we need to talk about it. We need to tell the truth. You're right about that. Although I have to say that it's interesting you mentioned, I was just telling someone recently, so years ago, years and years ago, I taught Western Civ. Remember Western Civ?
Yes.
I don't think they teach it anymore, but I did teach it. And we get to the 20th century, and I had to talk about World War II and the Germany and Nazis. And I thought I was a hot ticket. I was a smart kid. I was arrogant. And I found I couldn't explain the Holocaust. I knew what happened, clearly. I knew the details. Students would say, how did this happen? And I couldn't do it. I couldn't explain it in a way that I was satisfied with. I just couldn't. I still can't. There are things that happen inexplicable. Of course I know what happened, all the details, but to say what Germany in 1932, the year before Hitler took power, was the most advanced intellectual society in the world. They had the most Nobel Prizes, they had the most advanced universities, all the science, well, most of it, the 20th century, comes from Germans, and a lot of them left, but it came from there, and yet, look what happened. That's a good example of why knowledge does not bring about always good things. The most knowledgeable society in the world, and they became the most evil society in the
They
world.
weren't knowledgeable under your own definition.
That's, well, they didn't have wisdom, but they were knowledgeable, they sure knew
Yeah,
physics.
I'm sorry, they didn't have wisdom.
They didn't have wisdom, they sure knew physics. I mean, even the ones who weren't Jewish who left would say the same thing. It's a fascinating, very fascinating subject. So, what are the great enemies? What are the, let's talk briefly. What's this class over?
It's at 12:30,
12:30.
so if you give me 2-3 minutes at the end to
Okay,
wrap
sure, of
up.
course. So what are the enemies of practical wisdom? What are some of the enemies? Well, one surely is power. Power. People who have power don't give it up. If they have power, they don't give it up. They will not, very few people resign at the top of their game, saying, well, I'm getting a little old, I don't think I'm as sharp as I was, or I seem to be, I can't understand some of these issues. Some of that Sandra Day O'Connor did, to her credit. She did that. But very few people, look at some of the old farts who are running this country, frankly. I mean,
All of them.
right, all of them, yeah. On all sides. That people don't want to give up power. They get it, they fight for it, and they don't give it up. And it's an enemy of practical wisdom. It just
They get
is.
too much there, they're getting compensated too greatly.
Oh, yeah, the applause of the crowd.
Not even that, man,
It's
oh,
so
look at Ben,
Every
who's
sentence.
that Ben, the guy that ran against Trump?
Carson,
His son and daughter-in-law have a consulting grant now to some company, he went along with that, they go along with everything because they get too much benefit.
Sure.
not
Oh,
to.
yeah, no, it's perfect.
So
I mean,
the
power is really an enemy of this stuff. It's addictive too. I'd say it's like an opiate. Power,
Yeah.
really. You get a little bit of it, people really, from grade school teachers who become, to people running
Yeah,
countries.
it isn't just politicians, it's,
Oh, no.
it's
Yeah,
family
absolutely.
dynamics.
Oh,
Power corrupts.
absolutely.
Power
Yeah.
corrupts.
It really does.
Power
yeah.
corrupts and
Absolutely.
absolute power.
I think in terms of tradition, I think in terms of the medical community. And so you're a doctor intern and you're working 24 hours a day, you know. And so it made no sense, but they fought for years to give that up. And, oh, we did that, you know,
Yeah,
the old
exactly.
doctors, the old
Oh,
guys,
yeah.
oh God, we did that, they can do it.
That's right. W.H. Jordan has a great poem. He says, those to whom evil is done do evil in return. So you tend to think if evil is done to you, you would be more compassionate, but no, very often you pass it on to somebody else.
Right.
How about intelligence as an enemy of practical wisdom? Being very, very smart. Do you think that could be an enemy of practical wisdom? It wasn't in Einstein's case, clearly. What about other cases? Let me give you another example. Former president of Harvard, Larry Summers, who I've actually met once or twice, loves to be known as being very, very smart. He likes it, and he is very, very smart in terms of knowing about economics and doing mathematics in his head. He was so arrogant. He was too arrogant for Harvard. Do you know how hard it is to be too arrogant for Harvard? Any idea how arrogant you have to be to do that?
I'm gonna tell a quick
yeah.
story.
Of course.
I went to Lorraine High School, very hard scrabble high school. And one of the kids in my high school went on to become the dean of the Harvard Business School.
That's Norris?
Jay Light.
Jay Light, oh, I remember.
And
Yeah,
he's a guy kid I used to play tennis with. And he said about Larry Summers, he's not half as smart as he thinks he is.
So what he didn't have is humility.
Zero.
Zero.
Zero. I had to bring a document to his office once that I wrote. He wanted to see it. And he just sort of barked at me like a dog. What do you want? And I said, I can be quick-tempered, and I'm from Brooklyn. I had to fight a lot as a kid. I really want to say, well, what you wanted was this, but you ain't getting it, sucker. I would walk away. And I would cause a lot of problems. But, I mean, exactly, that type of arrogance, that type of intelligence could be an enemy.
I think it's a mistake to broad brush the the title intelligence with the lack or working against wisdom.
Not always.
Because
but
not,
yeah.
yeah, but you know, because there are a lot of intelligent people that are very wise as
Look at
well.
all of us.
Right. So to use that as a as an
No,
all-encompassing
I just said
term
these are
is
some enemies and some people. One of the
I mean-
great enemies of practical wisdom is universality. Is to say, that's another one, to say that all thing now.
right. That's right. So.